fresh off a cup final trouncing at the weekend, Brian. It's going all right here, back home in the Mearns, isn't it?
Yeah, not bad. Being on my doorstep, so yeah, it was nice to be involved and be a part of it for sure.
Are you missing kind of going around and touring the grounds? I know certainly like before you came into the role, you were jumping around a few grounds. I seen that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So you don't think I'm following you about the place or anything?
No. I think it was important that I was still taking in games. When you do retire and then obviously leaving Clyde at that point, then you find yourself out the game. Then being able to occupy yourself at weekends was massive, because Saturdays are a difficult day when you're not involved in it, so to speak. So doing little tasks and jobs for managers that are still in position, like doing analysis for oppositions that they might face, then if I can help and oblige to that, then I will, when I've got the spare time to do that.
You say that you're on your doorstep here. In your introduction interview, you said it was just a simple conversation that you had with Martin, and here you were. But was it really that easy just to step into it, or were there maybe other jobs that would have maybe came about higher up the pyramid, given your footballing career, but also the fact you were at Clyde for a few months?
Yeah, potentially. But I mean, it was a very simplistic conversation with Martin, and it was literally just off the back of a conversation that he had within his network, and the timing of it was right for me and my family as well. You're probably just approaching a year from when I left Clyde, so I massively wanted to get back on the coaching pitch, back in amongst the sort of dressing room and aspects to it all with the players and that, and managed to sort of have a positive conversation with Martin that ultimately resulted in me coming in to help assist him as much as I can, and I'll continue to do that for however long he wants me to do it, and see what comes up in the horizon, you know.
Tell us about that though, like doing the analysis and stats, because you were saying that that's something you've been into since you left the game. Where did that start, and how do you really implement it?
Yeah, no, I've always been interested in stats and data, especially when I get injured at such a young age in my career, being sort of 21, 22, then you actually begin to understand your body a bit more, and you want to find out more about how it's performing and the outputs and etc. So that continued throughout my career, and then I was actually given a great opportunity to meet up with, ironically, Player Data, which was in the tail end of 2019. So I've been associated with them for GPS side of things towards the tail end of my career, and then just trying to help promote Player Data, promote the GPS, using my network, and then with St Cadocs using it, and they're sort of one of our founder clubs as well, that Martin's a big advocate of it, and he uses it quite religiously, which is that's the way the game's going, and especially with the couple of years that I did drop down to a part-time level, that I did massively. I struggled to adjust to that side of things, going from a full-time environment to then a part-time environment, because you've got so many outside influences, that you've got work commitments that could be a more laboursome job than others. So the actual physical output throughout the day is a lot more different and individualised to when they actually come in and you get your hands on the group, and then you're able to do more footballing aspects to it to prepare them for the Saturday. So there's a lot of things to juggle nowadays, and you can see sports science, especially at the top end, you're looking for that 0.1% to make the difference, especially at elite level, that you've got to factor in the day jobs, especially at part-time level. So Martin's a big advocate of it, and we do take things into consideration with training load, etc. And analysis wise, we do regular meetings and reviews from the previous games from the weekend. So we'll be doing one again tonight and here. So
and here, this isn't a classroom. This is a film room, isn't it? This is not an Eastwood High School written PE classroom.
I know. It is what it is.
It's giving me PTSD for all the boring ones. You know, you'd have a great wee session of couple of hours of football back and forth, you're back right with COVID, and then you're in here to right. But Wikipedia claims that you're a Rutherglen boy yourself. Is that true?
Born in Rutherglen, yeah.
Good man,
yeah.
good man. So look at that, we've got more in common than meets the eye.
Take
us back to the start then, as we like to do, keep it nice and simple chronologically. The football upbringing, and you ended up playing for a couple of alright teams when you were young, didn't you?
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously, like my family's well sort of integrated into the footballing world.
Yes.
My dad, with his footballing background, been at Kilmarnock all his days, definitely wanted to emulate that. I did go to, I ended up leaving school when I was 16, after signing at 12 with Rangers, and then continuing all the way through till about 20 years of age. I went on loan to Motherwell with Terry Butcher there. Enjoyed that. Signed 3 years off the back of that loan move, which was great. Then hampered with injuries, 2 ACLs throughout that 3-year stint. Then just pushed from pillar to post towards the end of it. Offered a contract, then taken it away a week before the end of the season, then a manager moving on. So I kind of realised that I wanted a fresh and clean slate for myself, a change of environment, which was huge at the time, getting over those types of injuries. And then went to Falkirk for a couple of years, working with Eddie May, then Stephen Presley, which I've still got a brilliant relationship with him, and I love my time at Falkirk. I thought it was a fantastic club, and it's brilliant to see them where they're at now, and hopefully they continue to get the rewards come May time as well. And then from Falkirk, I went down to Preston North End for 2 years, which ended up a year, which was an interesting journey.
We're getting into that then.
Under Phil Brown, then he left, then Graham Westley came in, so that was carnage. And then came back up the road in 2012, signed for Dundee United. Again, another managerial change. Peter Houston left, and Jackie McNamara came in, and found myself surplus to requirements, and went up to Ross County for 2 years, which ended up being a year. I had a year extension there, but I phoned the chairman and told him that it wouldn't have been right for me to accept that. And I didn't have anything lined up, so I ended up being unemployed for 6 months, which then resulted in me jumping over to Singapore for a couple of years, which was by far one of the best moves that I've made. And yeah, a great relationship with Steve Keane. Spent 2 years over there, came back, went to Hibs for 6 months. So I'm well travelled, as you can probably tell.
Good, but these are the types of stories we like to hear about. I mean, the more journeyman, the better. But
incredible.
A common theme that I've been lucky to have is guys making those kind of weird and wacky moves here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. But we'll definitely get more on the. Well, technically, it was Brunei, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The club was funded by the Crown Prince, but you were playing in the Singapore League, and then did they not get expulsed from like
Malaysia
FIFA or something? Or something like that, and then they had to.
It was a Malaysian Super League, because they didn't pay their players in terms of when they get injured, they just cut their contract really when they were in the Malaysian league. So that they get sanctioned, they get kicked out, and then because it was in Brunei, Singapore was a 2-hour flight away. So they're an invitational team into the Singapore League. So every away game you're travelling a 2-hour flight, which again in this country it seems
it's an NFL team that sort of hang in touch.
But honestly, that's the thing. By going out there and then realising, yes, you fly on the Friday, you play the Saturday, you fly home the Sunday, and then you come here, and the mentality is 3.5, 4 hour journey up to Dingwall and Inverness. Like, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It's just your mindset in terms of how you want to approach it. And if you prepare right, then you've got nothing to worry about.
I keep seeing all these tweets. It's the European mind could never comprehend, and it's like from New York to wherever. It looks like that much on the map, but it's about 3 hours yet. We moan about going pole to pole in the country. I want to jump right back because you were at Queen's Park as well when you were young. So you played for.
Jeez, you were going back, didn't you?
I did my
done your research.
I always do. due diligence. So you'd end up playing for two of Glasgow's South Side teams, one slightly more financially superpower than the other at that point.
Yeah.
At least, how would you then compare and contrast the whole amateur youth experience to Rangers pretty much just coming off the back of their most successful decade, but ultimately were there good parts about the Queen's Park experience that you maybe didn't quite get at Rangers and vice versa? Like, talk to us about that then.
Yeah, Queen's Park, I think I was only there for about a year. And it was a lot more homely and togetherness with it. Obviously, a big history in terms of being that amateur club, and training right next door to the National Stadium, which was excellent. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that time. And then the opportunity came up to go to Rangers. And at the time, my dad was a youth coach at Cadoc when he just retired. So I think it was a bit of a, like, if your dad's there, then why are you not going there type thing. And he was probably the biggest influencer for that decision, because he knew the best way for me to develop and evolve into my own personality, my own character, was to go and do it elsewhere. And to be able to go and do it at one of the best setups in Scotland, especially when Murray Park had just opened up, that was my first year, then that was the best environment for me to be in, to go and grow. And I'm grateful for my dad to have that strong-mindedness and clarity in making that decision for me, because I believe he was under a little bit of pressure at that point to try and get me towards the Ayrshire side of things. But no, I loved it. It was the best decision, and it carried me right the way through.
So were you brought up a Kelly man, or were you brought up a Rangers man in Rutherglen?
No, I was 100% Kilmarnock.
100%.
My dad played there for a number of years, probably about 20 years, maybe his whole career.
I made about 500 odd appearances or something like that, or it must be more than if he spent his full career.
He's second top appearances, but then if you include substitution appearances, then between him and Alan Robertson, then he's top of the pile, which is great. So
he's like Pelly with his goal stats.
Almost. He's played every position, so he tells me that, other than goalkeeper. So no, he had a brilliant career, and that was the thing for myself as well, especially leaving Rangers to go to Motherwell. I had the sense of, and I loved my time there in terms of having that first year being on loan, that I kind of felt that I wanted to emulate my dad and be a one club type person. And then with the cards that I was dealt, with injuries that sort of came my way, unfortunately, that I knew I had to make the decisions myself based on how I felt and how I seen my career going. And I knew I needed a change in environment, a different stimulus, a different picture. And I always remember going back to Fir Park playing, whether it was with Falkirk or Ross County or Dundee United, and you always get the old heckles from the stands, like, are you no injured yet? So but that's part and parcel of it. And the fact that I have had a lot of clubs in my time, but I've always stood by my decision as well. And I've turned contracts down. I've bought myself out of contracts because I knew it wasn't the right fit for me, and I would have been a negative influence on the group. And that's, I'm probably a more moralistic person than most, I would say.
I do now apologise for any referee pro-Rangers conspiracies that I may have concocted up, unless, of course, Stephen himself was a Rangers man and wasn't a Kelly man, or was he also a Kelly man himself?
Absolutely, he was. We had season tickets when we were younger.
I'll believe you on that one.
But again, when professionalism kicks in, then it's just 11 v 11, and you're just trying to do your job. You know, I'll sit in the fence and get the scalps off that.
Who were the kind of characters you would have been in about then at Rangers when you were young? Because there must have been some all right names flying about.
Oh, huge personalities. Even just watching training, like it was incredible. You get the De Boers were there, Arteta, Barry Ferguson. The Scottish ones were big influencers for me as well. Bob Malcolm, Maurice Ross, Stephen Hughes, Craig Moore was a huge presence for me, and I still bump into him from time to time with connections with my agent as well. That I took a lot. I always remember the time that we had a reserve game against Hearts at Ibrox, and Oz was watching, and we had a little chat after the game. And it's little moments like that. For me, being 18 years of age, speaking to a first team player of his calibre, his stature and presence, then it was always going to sort of stand clear in your mind that that was the type of character that I tried to emulate and try to break into the scene. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be, and my path was better off elsewhere.
So when you ended up going to Motherwell, were you just almost desperate to get out on the pitch and nail down the first 10 minutes? Was that the kind of thought behind then going on loan and eventually signing for them?
Yeah, I mean, we played a bounce game at Murray Park against Motherwell reserves. I think it was on the international break, just towards the end of the loan window closing. And after the game, Terry Butcher had a chat with Durante, and next thing I know, there was an opportunity there to go on loan to Motherwell, and it was almost closing time within the window for that loan move to go through, and thankfully it did. And it was just a case of applying myself to a new environment. And a lot of people might struggle because you're going from such a hospitality setting with Murray Park to then getting changed at Fir Park, jumping in your car sharing DL Parks, pissing with rain, back into Murray Park, back into Fir Park, and then you've got the gym up in behind at the time it was the Philadelphia stand, and it was a polar opposite, and it was a sink or swim moment for myself and my career, and thankfully I managed to do all right swimming wise, so it was all right. Aye.
Terry Butcher, as you mentioned there, big character, big personality. Did he live up to his reputation, would you say?
Oh, 100%. 100%. He's one of the best managers that I've had. An infectious character, a demanding character, and he'll tell you at point blank. He'll tell you exactly how he sees it and exactly how he wants you to perform. But the good thing is that he also wanted to spend time with you to make you better. So he was invested in it. It wasn't just one way. It was he also wanted to get you on the training pitch and do an extra 15-20 minutes after sessions. And I learned a lot as well. And in terms of the back four at the time, you'd Stevie Hamill at left back, you'd Martin Corrigan at right back, you'd Stephen Craigan at right centre back, and then myself. So I was in good company. So if I'm not going to learn senior football well within those types of characters, then I would only have dropped further down the sort of pecking order in leagues. But I love that time, and even trying to reflect on it. I mean, now I'm 39, so it goes in the blink of an eye. It literally goes in the blink of an eye.
Are there things then that, like from Terry, for example, that you have now pretty much directly taken, not plagiarised, of course, but have been influenced then since you've been a coach for a wee while now, haven't you? Whether that be the top job or whether it be in the youth teams or an assistant here, are there things that you've taken directly and implemented into training sessions, for example, or even just philosophies? Is there how much influence then have your past managers had on you?
I think the biggest thing, especially from Terry's playbook, is just being a human being, just humanising everything. Like a lot, especially at elite level, you watch the English Premiership and it's all kind of robotic.
Aye.
But at the end of the day, like, we're human beings, so you can dig people out for certain things, which is fine. But at the end of the day, once you've done that part, there's still that human element where you can still have a relationship. yeah, you'll fall out, but he'll also be the first hand that will stick out to pull you back up. And if you're in the trenches with somebody, then no better person than him. And there's been a lot of managers that I've chose not to learn off of because of certain events and how they've approached things. But then there's been a good number of managers that I have picked up a lot of traits from, and I try and continue that and take that on board into my coaching career for sure, because not everybody's going to be perfect right from the get-go, but what you do need to do is you need to make them feel comfortable that they can actually be in an environment to go and make mistakes, because that's the only way they'll learn.
See, I now have a habit of asking people this, especially guys like yourselves. It's the way that I see it is that, like, I feel managers are very now perceived on the way that they want to play and the way that they line a team up. Like, for example, maybe even separately for that, I remember when there was a debate over whether Callum McGregor has got it to be the Celtic captain, ultimately because he's not Scott Brown and he wasn't the sort of enforcer, that would strut around the pitch. But we don't see him when the cameras aren't there. We don't see how much respect the rest of the team's got for him. And ultimately, I think we're doing a nice job of humanising managers. That's one of my marketing type schemes I like to pull, and this is about humanising Scottish football. I want to ask about your move down to English football, which you said was interesting. Michael Tidser would probably tell you a very similar story at Celtic Hearts. He didn't have the greatest of times down at Rotherham. Yes,
Yeah.
aye. He may have told me one or two things off camera that were even more interesting.
He ended up coming up to County on loan, actually, while we were still at Rotherham.
But I want to ask, when you went down to Preston, what was the first thing that you just point blank went, oh, this is different to Scottish football?
It's different in terms of when the season starts, it started, because it's game after game after game after game, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. It was a new environment, a new challenge. You're not playing the same four teams 4 times throughout the calendar year. There's travelling involved, there's more overnighters, there's more time to bond with the players on road trips. And yeah, it was a totally different stimulus. I was fortunate enough with Preston having a sort of Scottish contingent there, with sort of Barry Nicholson and Paul Coates that were there when I joined, and it was brilliant. It was really good. Thoroughly enjoyed listening to Phil Brown and watching him operate. Doing a Sky Sports interview on a Friday before a game, and like he's wondering whether he should wear his shades during the interview to go along with his pinstripe suit. So it was brilliant. It was a thoroughly enjoyable one initially. Then for whatever reason, we actually got off to a brilliant start. We lost our first game, then we drew the second game, and then we went on a 8-9 game back-to-back wins. Then we wobbled the next 2 games, and then before you know it, we were reading that the manager's left his post, and then Graham Westley comes in and just turns it into just a free for all, really, which was absolutely outrageous. So, I'll let you ask any more leading questions on that.
Right, well, I'll be have just this discussion when the cameras are off here.
Aye, maybe.
Well, the thing that Tids always said though is that when he went down, he felt the whole they'd like won the playoff or something at Wembley. He'll kill me if I get that wrong, but it was something like that. But he said that guys were very much in, do the job, finish the game, and that was them. And he thought that was weird because if they had stayed up in a playoff fight, or if they'd went up through the playoffs, there'd be party for like the next week. Like for example, Darren Young is out, we were talking about there. I'm gutted I never got to ask him this the first time, but I then read the article about the whole team going to Foo Bar in Stirling, and I thought, good, I like the sound of that. But he said it was just very, and I think I sort of supplement that it was very much professional footballers to the definition and no much more. Would you maybe agree with that, or was the environment different at Preston?
Yeah, no, it was the type of dynamic within the dressing room is different to the Scottish mentality.
Right.
In terms of you win together, you drink together type thing. Not so much that alcohol was a driver in that, but in terms of spending time away from the training ground or after games in circulating as a group, as a team together, it was always a little bit more fragmented, with not so much cliques, because we as a team we got on very well, but as I said, you had a Scottish contingent, and then you've got a more London-based contingent, and there is different dynamics within the dressing room naturally, and that kind of is the English mentality down there, that you're Scottish, so it's kind of, you've almost been branded straight away. But there was little pockets within the dressing room. Yeah, I get what Michael's saying there, but our dressing room we were quite fortunate because we stuck together quite thickly, and that was probably down to pre-season, being up at Arbroath doing a Royal Marines training camp for 3 days and being off the grid. So no, it was good.
It's always sort of you look, for example, the whole debate about Lewis Ferguson before he went off to Italy, was it maybe Norwich, and I'm pretty sure Preston were actually maybe in for him anyway, and there's guys up here that get talked about, whether they're going to go down south, and then there's always the Scots can't really hack it in England, or it's career suicide going down to England. Can you almost then see why that is a trend or a thing that we just don't seem to get along that well in English football, based off of what you've just said, really?
I mean, there's been a hell of a lot of success stories.
Yeah,
none more so than like the teammates at Rangers were Charlie Adam, Chris Burke, Stephen Smith, Ross McCormack. They all had glittering careers going down south.
Yeah, more so down south than up here, really.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I always remember I had a holiday just as I left Falkirk, and I wanted to leave Falkirk because I wanted to try and get down south and do something different, and it was always in my head, no, I want to try down south. I want to try and go and expose myself with those types of elements and demands. And my agent phoned while I was on holiday if I wanted to go, would I consider going to Kansas at the time? And I said no, because I wanted to go down south. And then I came home, and then I went down to Preston for a couple of weeks on trial, and then managed to make that permanent. But that was always my train of thought of, I want to go south of the border. And I get it up here as well, that especially for academy players, that, I mean, clubs down south, they've got such deep pockets that they can pay a couple of $100,000. That's absolutely nothing to them. It's a drop in the ocean. But up here, $200,000-300,000 is safety for a club for another year in terms of operational costs. So I get that, and I was always wanting to try and experience other things. And subsequently, off the back of that, like as I grew within my own personality, I wanted to go and try abroad and try somewhere different. And not many people have went and won the Singapore League. Not many people have went to Iceland and won their sort of FA Cup, so to speak. So
that's what I always say to my pals, like, because I'm the type of guy that wants to go to Riga in Latvia, because you can get like flights for about 20 quid off Ryanair, and everybody's like, why do you want to go there? And I say, because who goes to Latvia? It's
exactly.
We're just penny stocks to the English game.
Stands out.
We're just penny stocks to the English game, then, aren't we?
Absolutely.
I want to ask about your international career. I know there was the classic clerical error that may have put an end to it. How come though you opted to go through the Northern Irish system as opposed to the Scottish one? Because I remember Eddie McGeady, like when he spoke about going through the Irish system, that ultimately he just felt he was a lot better catered for as opposed to Scotland. What was your sort of experience then with Northern Ireland?
My experience was that at the point when I was sort of breaking into a more regular sport with Motherwell, that with my grandpa being from Ballymena, then I did qualify for that, and I hadn't played for Scotland since I was 18. So that kind of went dry. And I'm sure that there's a number of personnel that you've interviewed. Like, football goes by in a flash.
Yes.
That I'm not going to sit and wait about. And if an opportunity came up, and I was fortunate because I played alongside Stephen Craigan, who was naturally Irish anyway.
Yeah.
So whenever Laurie Sanchez came over at the time and watched Crags, then naturally
You were.
I was there to sort of maybe...
Next to him pretty much as well.
So it made logical sense for me to take up that opportunity to go and play for initially the under-21s for a couple of games, and then before you know it, I was involved with the senior team, which was a privilege. And then the carnage kind of erupts. I get called up for the squad for Portugal on the Saturday, and then Estonia on the Tuesday night. So I was on the bench for the Portugal game, and then I came on for the second half of the Estonia game at Windsor Park. My 21st birthday was the Monday, and the paperwork wasn't transferred from, in terms of the Irish FA reaching out and getting all the I's dotted, T's crossed. that wasn't done in time, unfortunately. And there was no more to it than that. Literally, it was just a carpet just ripped up from underneath you, which is nice. It's nice that I've had that experience, but it was such short-lived at that point.
It'd be nice to have had many more experiences like that.
Exactly. And I think ultimately off the back of that, I think that's where the rule legislations came in and changed to, I think, 28, 29 years old, that the paperwork's got to be done in time.
Well, you've been a revolutionary, you've been a martyr for the cause.
Aye, I know, it doesn't help.
An involuntary martyr, we're not like St. Peter or anything here.
No.
You played with some alright squads though, like as you mentioned at the start, you were with Neil Lennon's squad that had just come up for the Championship.
Yeah.
McNamara's first Dundee United team, and Ross County had established themselves now with their second year. What was the best group of players you were with? But I mean, come on, we're on a Scottish football podcast here. We want to know who the best dressing room was that you played with up here.
The best dressing room. There was different characters in every dressing room that I got on really well with. Ironically, Falkirk were right up there. The dressing room that we had with Mark Twaddle, Ryan Flynn, Burton O'Brien, Tam Scobie, Darren Barr. And I think it was more because the positioning that we had in the league, we were struggling. We did get relegated that year.
1 week later.
Right, well, Brian, where were we?
We had such a togetherness. A lot of players round about the same ages in terms of mid to later 20s. And we ended up just building up a bond, not so much on the training pitch, but away from it. Spent a lot of time meeting early for breakfast and going to the gym, spending more time within the actual building itself and external in people's houses, which, I mean, that's essentially what a dressing room's all about, and it just carries into other facets of your life. And I was, as much as it was a difficult scenario to deal with in terms of being relegated that year, then the bond that we actually had throughout that campaign was really strong, and we tried to sort of utilise that and to try and propel us straight back up. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be before I ended up moving on.
We'll get on to the fun part then. Brunei, of course, Steve Keane comes in, he's killing it out in Georgia, as we mentioned before. So just recap that whole experience, both on and off the pitch, personally and professionally, ultimately playing in the Singapore League, funded by the Crown Prince of Brunei.
Yeah, with Steve, it was a surreal environment to go into. I hadn't heard of the country itself, done a little bit of background work, and obviously with that being the period where I chose to leave Ross County at that point, and you're 6 months out of contract, out of work essentially, that it was important that I kept myself sharp enough for that to sort of materialise. And in January I went out for 2 weeks, and the experience was just second to none. And I mean, I'd done it just as I was approaching 30, so I would, and you see it nowadays in this day and age, that a lot of players are going abroad a lot earlier in their career, which is fantastic, and getting outside the sort of goldfish bowl that is Scottish football or British football, then it just exposes you to different cultures, and being able to see that and witness that and be a part of something special over there by winning the league for the first time for the Crown Prince is a surreal moment. And even when we did win the league, like my dad managed to fly over for it. We've got 30,000 in the stadium. We had to win the final game. We ended up winning 4-0 that day, and then you're in Starbucks for a coffee because there's no alcohol within the country. So, but that was just our mindset, and it wasn't a big deal. It's just a different way of life, and then before you know it, the sun's out the following day, and that's it. Like, it's as much as it was such a huge achievement, it's like, right, brilliant, move on to the next one type thing. So it was an incredible experience for sure.
Any experiences with the Crown Prince himself?
Not so much him himself. Wee things that I would pick up even on days off. I'd go and play golf first thing in the morning, and there'd be a golden 747 just circling the sky, the golf course, and it turns out that was the Sultan's sort of hobby and pastime. So he would just, as you do, like, you just take your 747 up in the air for a little bit and then land it. So between that, and I found myself singing karaoke to the Queen of Brunei at one point, which in our back garden she had 4 tigers as a standard way of living.
Garden sounds like a bit of an understatement.
It's more like exactly. So no, a brilliant environment, a brilliant way of life. And my oldest daughter, she managed to sort of come out at that time. She was approaching 2 years old, and towards the end, while I was out there, and it's just such a brilliant way of life. Their culture, the way they see things is different. They've obviously got their religion, then their family comes first, and then second, then anything after that. Like, it is what it is type thing. The sun will always shine tomorrow. But whereas our mindset, the sort of mentality, which I would never change, and I try to sort of take that over, but it's just amazing how much we do stress about the smallest things here, and do get our priorities a little bit skewed at times, whereas over there their perspectives are always there, which is admirable. And to this day, I've still got really good connections with the club, and Jamie McAllister's out there managing the team at the moment, so I've managed to sort of fill him in with some of the anecdotes and the way the local players think and play, and hopefully he has a progressive second half towards the season.
You told me as well that what's his name? Is it Fike Balkiam? I say it as the Sultan's son, nephew. He'd come over and trained with you as well. How was he then on the pitch then? Because I think all the Leicester City fans will be interested in that one.
So he was in training at Leicester. I think he was under 23. So then during the Ramadan period, then he would fly home for that. Our training that period would end up being at 9 o'clock at night. So that allows the players to try and refuel since the sun's set. And then he would join in some of the sessions, which again, a good experience for us, and it allowed us to actually integrate, because he's obviously living in England and understanding a lot more of the British mentality compared to the locals themselves. So he was all right. Nothing more than that. Nothing to get too excited about. But I'm not exactly sure where his tracks have went thereafter. But no, that was another opportunity there to be involved with the royal family, so to speak. And the Crown Prince would show up at every training session. That's the thing. Like, he was fully invested in the company and the club, not so much financially, but like, he's there at every single session. He watches every match as well, and when it is home games, then, like, when my wife would come over and she'd be in the stadium, like, she'd try and take pictures and send them home, or try and get a phone call, and the network would just be dead. And it turns out that the Sultan, wherever the Crown Prince is, he's got a little black box with him that just kills any network in the surrounding area, just in case something does develop. He takes those types of measures and precautions. So it's mental. It is mental in terms of the way of life over there, and privileged to have that experience, definitely.
I wonder though if there is some sort of link as to how he ended up at Leicester, because King Power is Malaysian, if I'm not wrong, and your team used to play in the Malaysian league, so I wonder if there was a wee bit,
Might well be.
I've just uncovered some can of worms here.
I'm
going to be expecting a wee 4x4 rolling up at the house later on. But
I know.
That's right.
Interesting. I don't know how it developed in terms of, I don't know, it might be favours or coaches, or there will be certain connections. I know that. So interesting.
Compare and contrast that then with your other foreign experience up in Iceland, because I can't imagine it was quite as lavish as being in the Queen's Back Zoo is probably a better way to describe it.
Yeah. No, it definitely wasn't. It was almost chalk and cheese, to be honest. When I arrived in Iceland, the club put me into a hostel, which was different. We were preparing. My first game was actually a semi-final of the Cup, which we ended up winning and qualifying for Europe, which was great. But our pre-match meal was like a Subway sandwich. And then the week before the final itself, we were putting up fences for a festival that was on the island at that point. And they were getting like 25,000-30,000 tourists there because it's such a big deal, and it's just such a contrasting experience. And a lot of people that know me within the game will know what I stand for and how I've lived my life, that there's certain aspects that either meet my expectations or professionalism, or they don't, and that certainly was a club that didn't. I did sign a year and a half, and I lasted 4 months. I ended up having to buy myself out, so to speak, to be able to sign for another club, and that's the decisions that I had to make at that point. Especially having a young family, that it just wasn't conducive life. It wasn't an enjoyable footballing environment for me to learn and educate others round about me, and I'm not going to sit and waste precious moments of my career that I feel is not warranted, especially when others round about me are just cutting corners and try to fabricate things that just aren't there. So it was a good experience on one hand, in terms of being able to come home with a winner's medal and qualifying for Europe. When I arrived at the club, we were 2 points off bottom, and then we've comfortably finished mid-table and managed to win the cup, which was good. So come the end of the season, job done, managed to sort of agree a deal to terminate my contract and move on. So that was the right thing to do.
Before we then get on to your maiden managerial voyage, I want to actually ask you about managers. You've spoken about Steve over in Brunei. Are there any managers you didn't quite get along with throughout your career?
Yeah, there was a couple for sure.
Oh, right.
A couple for sure. None more so than the lad at Preston that came in off the back of Phil Brown leaving. It was Graham Westley. I'm sure a lot of people know of him. A couple instances. He just focused so much of his time on myself that I wasn't part of his plans, and I was on peanuts compared to others in the dressing room. I found myself having to cover my tracks, so to speak, making sure that the PFA were aware of my situation down in England, that whenever I was summoned into the manager's office for a conversation, that he was on the verge of checking CCTV footages to see that I'm parking in the right parking space. And it was just embarrassing between doing invisible weight sessions on the pitch, training from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 p.m. at night, because that was the sort of working class environment. And we've got players like Barry Nicholson, Neil Mellor, Clark Carlisle, Big Morgs as well. It's Ian Ashby. It was just baffling, his approach to it. And I ended up leaving shortly after that, towards the end of the season, and when you play a bounce match at Deepdale between the squad of, I think it was 24 players we had. I was one of the subs for the game, and we played three 20-minute games, and so he made changes, first, third, second, third, made another couple of changes, and I was the only one not to play. So it's something that's out of character with me, but I was so pissed off that it was like I just grabbed every single ball that I could find and just smashed it into the stand and then walked in. And then I was sent towards the training ground to go and train with the physio. So something that is totally uncharacter in terms of how I would approach it. And I mean, always treat people the way you would want to be treated. And for me, that was an absolute disgrace. And the fact that he's even worrying about my concerns when he's not even won a league game, it was disappointing. But between him and Derek Adams, it was a close toss up. But Graham Westley for sure was up there.
Derek Adams doesn't think Scottish football's very good, does he? After his 3 not very successful stints with Ross County. How did they end up actually then, Preston, after you left? So how long did he last?
He lasted 10 months. So he arrived
ironic.
In January, and I think he left October, November time. So he lasted 10 months. So again, that speaks volumes.
Sorry to say it, but we're going to talk about another short-term managerial gig, which was your own at Clyde.
Yep.
1 minute you're the captain, next year the head coach, as you more described it. Just talk to us about that. Was that the plan? Was it a surprise? Give us the lowdown of that, because I'm sure there's plenty of Clyde fans that would like to hear about all that.
Yeah, it was the next logical step for myself in terms of trying to progress my coaching career, and trying to have some sort of apprenticeship towards that, with Jim moving up the stairs as a director of football role. He was still very much the one picking the team, signing the players, and I had the label, and at some point that responsibility would fall on top of me. It's just early on that wasn't the case, and we got off to a poor start. Even the way sort of training went, and the pre-season games programme wasn't ideal, far from it. And then, sure as fate, Jim sort of moves on, and then everything sort of falls on top of me all of a sudden. And then you're trying to do things the way you want to do it, put your own stamp on things, have conversations, difficult conversations with players that you didn't see eye to eye with. I would always want to be told straight. There's no point spending time blowing smoke towards people that you didn't really have much time for or much future for, especially when we did have a big squad, and trying to get players in. That could only develop with getting players out, and it was always a case of trying to manage the ship towards January, and then become more cutthroat with that. But having the 7 games that I got, I felt I got a reaction from the group straight away. I tried to make things enjoyable. I tried to make things a lot slicker in terms of moving from one part to the next part to the next part. That was all relevant and geared towards your Saturdays and your approach to the game and the opponent. And yeah, I mean, I was delighted to get the group's first win in terms of beating Elgin. That was a good achievement, but that was short-lived in terms of I'm always focusing on the next one, and the next one, and I thoroughly enjoyed that accountability and responsibility. And then off the back of that, having 7 games, it was I probably, looking back on it now, and I've analysed the life out of it, as you can imagine, the way I speak, is that I probably maximised that time period based on how I approached it. And I mean, I still keep in contact loosely with some of the players, which is great, but I never left any stone unturned, and I wouldn't have approached it any other differently in terms of how I did apply myself, and bringing in Chris Miller at the time to help me, a trusted person that I've got full trust with, that I can actually allow him to take the reins at certain points, to allow me to take a back step to oversee things, and that was all beginning to sort of unravel and get there. Even making at the point we didn't have a goal scorer, we didn't have anything. We didn't really have much legs in the middle of the park. We didn't really have much of a spine of a team. So you're trying to orchestrate that and ask people and demand of people that were just not capable of delivering that the way I kind of wanted it. And then like bringing in Connor Young at the time, like a fantastic goal scorer, and I always knew that if we could get him at the top end of the pitch and in around the box 25, 30 yards out, then he will get a shot away. He'll get shots on target. And if you get shots away, then it signifies some sort of impetus. And unfortunately, we weren't able to create enough opportunities for him. Bringing in Cian Leslie from Kilmarnock, that I know he would always get you on the edge of the seat because he was direct. And I think that was something that we lacked initially. And yeah, I mean, an enjoyable experience, but very much short-lived. And the thing is, like, the club has not progressed since I've been there. There was no direction. There was no real ownership. There was no real home, and there still isn't, which is a shame.
Given the announcement that came out today that they're on the brink of being the SPFL's third club in administration at the moment, does that surprise you a lot that an announcement like that has come out, maybe given the past few years of stagnation?
So I didn't know that. And
there's a GoFundMe set up today. I seen it on Twitter. They're saying that they're on the brink essentially of going into administration. So
that's it makes sense in terms of with what I had. I was only able to try and get people in for £7,500 a week, and it was always a case of get to January and then you might offload a few and balance the books a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the new manager comes in to replace me, and there's a big cash injection in January that is always going to be short-lived, because it's always going to be a quick fix before it falls flat on its face, because you're not actually building anything stable that you can actually fall back on. It was always going to be like that. And the thing is, the ones that are hurting the most are the supporters, like anything else, because the supporters are here when players, managers come and go all the time. So, and that's one of the biggest things, that it's got to matter to the players. It's got to matter to the coaching staff, because all they're doing, you're renting a seat there, and it should be a privileged seat. So you need to take it home with you. You need to take it to heart, and ultimately you will move on, and you need to make sure that you leave it in a better place than when you arrived. And unfortunately for Clyde supporters, and that doesn't seem to be the case, which for me is infuriating, because I was so invested in trying to help and connect with the fans. And even the night before we get beat against Bonnyrigg, that was my last game. We get beat 3-2 up there. And on the bus on the way home, I'm getting messages from directors not to go to a supporters night, which I'd already committed to. And so I went, no, I'm going to go. So I went. The players, some players came. It was brilliant. Really appreciated that. Not a great night in terms of where we're at our club. It was some of the supporters were a little bit sheepish, and then managed to get through it. You feel like you're actually trying to connect and put yourself out there to get shot at, but also to hear supporters' mumps and moans and let them vent. And then the following morning you wake up and you get a text message from the chairman saying, let's meet for a coffee. You know exactly what's coming. And I made him hear me out, because I might be new within the job, but instead of a 2-minute meeting, I dragged it out for 40 minutes just to vent and get it off of my chest, because he was the one that orchestrated the situation in the first place and put me in that position. And the one person that I thought would have my back when shit did hit the fan, which it did, would have been him and should have been him. And ultimately he showed his cards. I showed mine, and I can quite happily sleep at night knowing that I gave it everything. Midge gave it everything. I brought in a sports scientist. The ones that I brought in, they gave it everything for me. And as I said, I left no stone unturned. So it's just frustrating, because it's the fans that hurt them the most.
That's incredibly telling, actually. Well, I mean, I'm not a Clyde man at all, but I'm sure the supporters will I don't appreciate that wee bit of
Hopefully.
perspective. Probably at this time, better
Too late,
than
unfortunately.
Well, looks to be anyway. But I'll not keep you for too much longer,
No worries.
Brian. Since we're back here for round 2, I'm not going to get away for that. This isn't the film room. You know what my final question is? It's if we were to come back, either in this dressing room or in the classroom, in a year's time, and ask you what's a good job done, what would it be? If it's not, going into your brother's line of work, just because.
No, certainly
you
not.
seem to get so many knocks.
Certainly not. No,
the playing side of things.
I don't know how he deals with that. But yeah, for myself, obviously being at St Cadocs and helping assist Martin, I want the club to flourish and develop and add to the silverware that we picked up a few weeks ago, but continuously progress the club. And on a personal level, for me to continuously develop as a young coach and still being open-minded and find out more about myself and the direction I want to go in, and hopefully I'm a lot closer to that type of destination that I want to get to.
I think you just need a bit of luck, mate. I think that's all you need at the moment. But listen, it's been a pleasure to come back out to East Renfrewshire. I accidentally called Western Bartonshire East Renfrewshire last week when I was in Clyde Bank, but that episode's doing all right, so I don't think they've went for me just yet. I also got told off the media guy that they're not a junior club, but I addressed them as a junior club at one point, so I'm to be waiting for the pitchforks, but they've not come yet, so I'm not going to complain. But
fight another day.
It's been a pleasure.
Superb, mate.